Welcome to Follow Your Curiosity, where we explore the inner workings of the creative process. I'm your host, Nancy Norbeck. My guest this week is Tom Colgan, editorial director at Berkley Books, an imprint of Penguin Random House. Tom has spent more than 35 years championing such authors as Tom Clancy, Mark Graeney, and Janet Evanovich. We talk about how he got his start as an editor, what editors do and don't do, you may be surprised, how the creative process is different for everyone, and why, despite coming up with many ideas for books, he doesn't dream of writing one. He also has some advice for aspiring authors. If you've ever wondered how the books you buy got from an author's imagination to your coffee table, you'll enjoy my conversation with Tom Colgan. Tom, welcome to Follow Your Curiosity.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here with you.
Thanks. So I start everybody out with the same question, which is, were you a creative kid, or was your creativity something that you kind of discovered later on?
Gee, that's a good question. I guess maybe you should ask my sisters. I feel like, no, I feel like I was not very creative. I feel like I became more creative as I got older because I felt more like I could assert my creativity. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I felt kind of constrained when I was a kid. So no, I guess I wouldn't say I was a very creative kid.
So does that mean that you had things that you wanted to do but didn't have the opportunity when you say you felt constrained?
I wouldn't say I didn't have the opportunity, because I don't want to ever imply that like my parents or anybody it wasn't an outside constraint. It was more like, my biggest problem, I think, like a lot of people, is self-doubt, is definitely imposter syndrome. So I think what held me back was the thought, like, why would anybody want to hear what I had to say about this or what that or whatever? So I think that was really more the thing.
That makes sense. And yeah, that happens to so many people.
Yeah.
So many people.
Mm-hmm.
One way or another, comparison comes for us all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how did you come to discover your creative side?
It was my job. I'm an editor. And as time went on, I found that I was talking to authors about their books. And, at first I was really listening. And then I was listening and commenting. And then, a lot of times they talk about, like, well, I have a problem with this plot and I can't figure out how to get this guy from here to there. And, and I'd say, like, well, let's think about this. I mean, maybe if, this thing happened, it would propel him to go there. And then as time went on, it became more and more my job to do that. And then to some degree, in some areas, I literally just started with an idea. Like, I would make up an idea and then hire an author to, carry it out. So I am not at all like the most creative person. I'm definitely not like on the level of my authors, but in terms of little things, I feel like I'm creative.
Okay, fair enough. I think we're all creative in ways that we often don't recognize, too.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting that it kind of seems to have come on in stages a little bit with you.
Well, I think the stages are directly tied to my security, in my head, the building up of my self-esteem. You know what I mean? The more I became secure that, like, hey, that worked out. Oh, I could try this, and that worked out. Oh, I can try this, and that worked out. So I think it was more a matter of that, and just maturity. Just you get older, and I guess it is true that the older you get, the less you really care what people think. You absolutely. I mean, I'm older than you, and I'm telling you, it is absolutely true.
I had the most interesting conversation with my mom almost a year ago on my last birthday, because I turned 50 last year. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to her and I said, do you remember what I said to you on your 50th birthday when I would have been about 26, 25, something like that? And she said, no. And I said, oh, I do. I said, I told you that I was jealous because you were 50. I said, you proceeded to tell me that I was crazy. or it might have been more like she asked me, like, are you crazy?
Yeah.
And I said, no, I don't think so, because I think by the time you turn 50, either you've figured it all out or you don't care anymore if you've figured it all out. And I said, the closer I have gotten to this milestone birthday, the more I've realized that I was surprisingly wise at whatever age that was in my mid-20s, because it's really true.
It is absolutely true. But I do wonder, is there anyone who's figured it all out? I mean,
Oh, I don't think so.
I would be scared of people who think they've figured it all out. You know what I mean? Like, I think they'd be psychopaths if they think they've figured it all out.
I think the Dalai Lama probably hasn't figured it all out. So, there's no hope for the rest of us except to stop caring if we figure it all out.
Oh, so the Dalai Lama might have like imposters. I never thought of that. Good Lord. Where are we?
I think the Dalai Lama probably recognizes that there are things we're just never going to know, and that's okay. I think if anybody exemplifies the art of acceptance, it's probably him.
You got that right. I'm sure that's true.
So, and maybe that kind of is figuring it all out. I don't
know. Wow, this got really deep really fast.
I know, it really did.
About that.
We could chew on that one separately, along with everybody who's listening.
Yeah.
So, I find it interesting. So people who are listening don't know that we discovered each other on Twitter not all that long ago. And you have been posting these great handwritten notes every day called Chronicles of the Quotidian.
Yeah.
And the one that really stands out in my mind was the story of how you got your first job as an editor, which I think was pretty creative, to be honest. And I'm wondering if you would share it with everybody else.
So I, if I'm thinking the same story, so I was working for Berkley, and I was an assistant. I was not an editorial assistant. I was just I was an assistant to a guy who was the publishing manager. It was a great job. He was a great guy. It was really great working for him. And at the time, there was a person who did nothing but Westerns. This was 1986. Maybe 87. There's a person who did 7 Westerns a month. It was a full-time job called the Westerns editor, did 7 Westerns a month. That person left. And to this day, I remember she went to UPS. I don't know why. I cannot remember what I had for breakfast, but I can remember that this woman left to go work for UPS. And I determined that I was going to get this job. I went to the editor-in-chief, and I said to him, you have to give me the Western job. I love Westerns. There's nobody else here who knows Westerns as well as I do. I'm your man. I'm going to do right by these Westerns in a way that nobody else can. And what I didn't count on at the time was that how desperate he was, because he had these 7 books a month and nobody wanted to touch him with a 10-foot pole. Here I was, like, desperately trying to convince him. And the minute I said, like, I want to do the Westerns, in his head, he was like, great, perfect, they're yours. So he says, okay, you can do the Westerns. So I said, great. And then I left, walking, it was like 10 feet in the air in my head. And I stopped in Penn Station on the way home and bought the first Western I had ever read in my life, because I had completely lied to him. I had never read a Western. I had never seen, the only Western movie I ever saw was The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. And I had not even watched like Bonanza or anything. So I knew nothing about Westerns. I had just completely lied to him. And to make matters worse, the Western that I bought was by a guy named Brian Garfield, who also wrote Death Wish. Back in the day, all these big authors like Elmore Leonard, were pulp writers, and a lot of them wrote Westerns. So I read Brian Garfield's, and it was really wonderful. And I thought, like, man, I lucked out. And then I got my first manuscript, and I was like, wow, this is not the same caliber that I read. So, but the thing that was so beautiful about it, because it was such a typical publishing story, was what he really said to me was, great, you can become the Westerns editor, that full-time job, as long as you keep your other full-time job as an assistant. So for 2 years, I did 2 full-time jobs, but I was very happy doing them. And that was my entree into editorial, was doing the Westerns.
And somehow you still managed to sleep for those 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, the thing was, the reason you could do 7 a month was there was like a bunch of guys who did them. Like they like there was a cast of writers, who, nobody could write 12 books. Well, some guys could write 12 books a year. So, and they had been doing it forever. Like they were probably writing them when they were like contemporaries. These guys were so old. So, I mean, honestly, like they knew what they were doing. They didn't really need me. I mean, occasionally I, say like, hey, you killed this guy on page 36 and he's back on page 52, this henchman returned from the dead, but they didn't really need me. So it was not that hard a job, but it was a really good entree into editorial.
Yeah, that sounds like it could have been a really interesting training ground because you could just see, for the most part, how it was done because it was being done right in front of you.
But can I tell you, can I get a little dark and tell you the
Sure.
sad part of this? Okay. So the sad part of this is that, so there were probably like 7 books a month. There were probably like 14 guys who like rotated among these books, and they were all great. They were all really nice. And I would go to this Western Writers of America convention every year, and they would be so nice to me and like hanging around, talking to me, laughing at my jokes, blah, 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 and all this stuff. And then one day I got another job, and I remember calling them and, saying to them like, hey, listen, I'm leaving here and I'm going to go to Avon. And so I don't remember who, so-and-so's taking over the Westerns. And most of them were great. But I remember one particular guy who had been the nicest guy to me said, oh, okay, you're doing any Westerns at Avon? And I said, no Westerns. He said, okay, goodbye. I was like, wow. Like, I was just a kid, I was like, I don't know, 25, 26 or something. And I thought this guy and I were best pals. But the minute, like, there was nothing I could do for him, he was like, okay, goodbye. All right. It was kind of sad. Now I'm sad thinking about that now.
Man, yeah.
Yep. But that was just one guy. I mean, the other 13 or 12 or 13 guys were great. So, I mean, I shouldn't dwell on the one guy who was,
No, but it is interesting because, I mean, there is such a relationship that you build, especially since you had that
Yep.
group over time that, yeah, no, that would be incredibly surprising and jarring. And I'd have to like go for a walk or sit down for a while after that. Just be like, I don't know what that just happened. Yeah.
Yeah. What can you do? But.
Wow. So had you always envisioned being an editor, or did you just want to be in publishing in general? And when that opened up, you just said, hey, why not?
Oh, I always wanted to be an editor.
Okay.
When I was in college, I was the editor of the humor magazine. I was the editor of the yearbook. I was at various times. I didn't do it all at once. I was the editor of the yearbook. I was the editor of the literary magazine. I wasn't the editor of the newspaper, but I wrote for the newspaper. I always wanted to be an editor. And I have another story. I'll tell you another boring story about publishing. And I knew somebody who worked at Berkley, and she said, hey, we have an opening. Do you want to come and apply for it? So I said, fine. I just want to get my foot in the door of publishing. So this was in the department called Operations, and Operations is in charge of getting everything, like making sure the book happens, not just like making sure the paper gets to the printer, and then the printed books get from the printer to the warehouse, and then they get shipped out and all this stuff. So it's just tons and tons of like stuff like that. And this is 1985. So there's like one big computer in a room, I mean, it's not like, a computer on every desk. There's one big computer in every room, and it prints out on these huge big sheets of green and white striped paper, with the sprockets on the side. And this assistant job, you would take these big sheets and you would take a ruler and because no one else could use that, you'd write, you'd copy like 235 copies going here, and you'd copy it on a piece of paper, 220 copies going, and then you distribute that information to people by hand. I guess you just copied it or something, you Xeroxed it or something. And I applied for this job. I was so desperate. And right when I applied for it, they were ready to hire me. And then this other job opened up, which was an assistant to the publishing manager, which was 100 times more interesting than that. And I felt kind of bad turning down this job that they were ready to hire me for, but they were very understanding. And I worked with those people, the people I sort of stiffed. I worked with them for years after that. They were always very nice to me. But that I wouldn't have lasted a week in that job. I would have been out of publishing in a year. But I just wanted to get my foot in the door. And then, I wanted to get into editorial. But that's about, that is always a problem when you're hiring in publishing, because everybody wants to be in editorial. Maybe some people want to be in publicity, and maybe some people want to be in art, cover art. But, there's so many other jobs. Nobody wants to apply. No one is out there in college thinking like, man, I really want to be in contracts in publishing, or I really want to be in, pub ops,
Mm-hmm.
But those jobs can be really interesting if you're of a mind to, but it's hard to get of a mind to. So anyway, sorry, I'm blabbing.
No, that's fine. I think that it's interesting because, most people are not aware of all of the moving parts that go into a book being published. They know there's an author, they know there's an editor, they know somebody prints it and somebody takes it to the bookstore or to Amazon or whatever.
Yep.
But that's really about all we see. And in fact, I was hoping that you would tell us exactly what an editor does and doesn't do, because I think that people have a really skewed perception of that in some ways.
Oh, good. Well, the first thing we do not do, well, I shouldn't put it that way. The first thing people say to me when they meet me, and I say, "Oh, I'm an editor," is, "You must be a good speller." I'm like, not necessarily. It does not follow from that. That's a copy editor. A copy editor can be in-house, but a lot of times they're freelance people who actually go through the manuscript and make sure not just that the grammar is correct and the spelling is correct, but they also make sure that if you say Utah became a state in 1884, they look and say, no, it became a state in 1876 or something. P.S. I have no idea when Utah became a state, so don't send any letters in saying, Utah. Utahns? Utah? What are people from Utah called?
I think that's actually it, but I'm not sure how you pronounce it properly.
I don't know either. But I apologize. Yeah. So I just don't know. But no, what I do is I acquire the book. So agent sends me a manuscript. I read it. If I like it, I go to my boss and say, "Hey, I need some money to buy this manuscript." And then there's a whole big process about figuring out how much it's worth. Then I work with the author on the book, editing it. Like I will, have an early conversation with them about I think this part needs punching up. It gets a little slow in the middle, whatever. Then I will, he'll send me the first full draft. Then I'll write back, and that's the first editorial letter where I'll say specific things. I don't understand this character's motivation. I don't understand. I think this part is great, but I think this part needs some work or whatever. He'll send me a second draft. A lot of times that's all the editorial work, but sometimes we'll go back for a third draft. It depends. Then I put it in for production. That's when the copy editor comes in. The copy editor does his work. But the thing is, what I am an advocate for this book. I am the only person in the house who is with this book from beginning to end. I am with this book from the first day it comes in, and I read it, and then I present it to the art people to try to get the right cover on it. I present it to the sales department. I pitch it to the sales department so that they get excited about it. I talk to the marketing people about it. I talk to the publicity people about it. I do all this stuff. I do everything with it I mean, everybody else does too. Don't get me wrong. There's a ton of work that other people put into it, but I'm with it all the way from then until it's published, after it's published, and then sometimes, years later, the author might want his rights back. Maybe it's no longer selling, and the author wants its rights back. And I'm the person they come to and say, hey, this book that you published 10 years ago is no longer selling. The author wants his rights back. Is there any reason to talk to him and maybe think that we could do something with it? So I'm with this book from beginning to end, and it's my job. My main job really is to advocate for it, to make it the best book it can be, and then advocate for it. And I love it. I love every minute of it. I love dealing with my coworkers. I love my authors. They're wonderful, interesting people. They're all very, very smart. They're all very nice. And there's nothing else I could do in the world that would bring me as much happiness as this. Well, I mean, other than my family, but I'm just saying, there's no work. Right. There's no work I could do in the world that would bring me as much happiness as this. Thank God. I hope Claudia doesn't listen to this. My wife.
I love stories of great fits, though.
Yeah.
Because they sometimes seem so elusive, and it's great to see what it's like when they're not.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I'm not surprised that the first thing that people say to you is, you must really know your grammar and punctuation rules, because I was surprised when I did my MFA and someone in my advising group had done an internship, and it might have been with Penguin, I don't remember now, and came back and said, yeah, no, they don't edit anything at all in the sense that you and I think of editing your draft. It just doesn't happen. And I know I've seen stories in recent years of, the New York Times firing most of its copy editors and that kind of thing. How is that in publishing these days? I know you said sometimes it's freelance, but
no, everything gets copy. It gets. First of all, back up. Let me back up. So what I work on is commercial fiction, right? I don't work on nonfiction, not anymore. I have in the past, but right now I work on commercial fiction. I don't work on literature. I don't work on nonfiction. So my main focus is character, plot, action, stuff like that. I will absolutely correct the spelling when I go through. Mm-hmm. And I will also line edit it. Like I will line edit and say, like, I feel like, this phrase is clumsy, and I'll, move it, some words around and stuff like that. But when you really get down to it, I like who or whom. I'm kind of big on who or whom. I will say that.
Everybody has their bugaboo.
That is my thing. Yeah, for sure. But, that or which, I have a vague idea why some things are which and some things are that, but I don't even bother. That's what the copy editor does.
Mm-hmm.
The copy editor does that. I actually am kind of a good speller, I have to say. I am kind of a good speller. You know what I am? I would put it this way. I'm one of those people, I might not be able to spell it right, but I know when it's spelled wrong. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like I look at it, I go, there's something wrong with, I know enough to look at it and say, there's something wrong with this. I don't know if there's supposed to be 4 S's in assassin. Actually, there are. But I'll look it up. So mm-hmm. I'm good with that. So I read it. Well, first of all, the author reads it, obviously, sends it to me. I read it. I go through it, check all that stuff. Goes back to the author. Author reads it again, blah, blah, blah. Then it goes to copy editor. Copy editor goes through and does all his her copy editing, which is all the things we talked about, the grammar, the punctuation, and copy editors, this is a bone of contention between copy editors and authors sometimes. And I say this to authors all the time. Copy editors are paid to be didactic. So you can't get upset if they're like just constantly calling you out for, who or whom. You mm-hmm. can't get upset about that because that's what they're paid to do. You don't have to, the thing is, you don't have to accept it. If you feel like my story sounds better this way, even if it's wrong, my story sounds better this way, then we'll let you do that, unless there's some completely crazy thing. But, mm-hmm. Usually we'll let you do that. Then it gets set into what they call page proofs, the pages that look like an actual book. And then it goes to a proofreader. The proofreader reads it, and he will find mistakes. And then sometimes the managing editors who are in-house, if it's a big, important book or something happened or there's a reason to think there's a problem, they'll read it. They'll do what they call a cold read after the proofreader has read it, and they'll go through. And, Yet, despite all that, I guarantee you, then some reader will write in and say, like, "Hey, on page 32, he's talking to Sue, and he calls her Jane." You're like, "Oh, you were absolutely right. I don't know how we all missed it, but it happens."
I remember seeing a tweet or a blog post from Neil Gaiman many years ago saying that the guaranteed way to find the typo in your finished book is to pick up the brand new copy, open it to a random page, because there it will be.
That's absolutely true. 100%. It is literally astonishing, like how many times we will find these mistakes and everyone's aghast. I can't explain it. I just can't. I don't know how we miss them, but we do.
I think at one point he was, telling people, yeah, if you find them, send them in. We'll get them in the next edition.
Oh, we do. No, we do. We say that all the time.
Yeah.
We say, like, we'll, there'll be reprints. We'll fix it. It's just nuts that it happens.
Well, as someone who has worked as a copy editor and proofreader and English teacher, I'm glad to hear that copy editing is not dead in book publishing
Not
the way
at all.
it seems to be dying in newspaper publishing. So
no, it's not dead. It's very healthy, very healthy. I mean, we have in-house copy editors, and then we have freelancers. But a lot of those freelancers are people who want to be freelancers. So I would hate to be a freelancer, but some people like that, sort of freedom.
So. Yeah. So when you say that you have to tell people, copy editors are paid to be pedantic, don't worry. Are there people that really get worked up about that? I mean, there must be, or you wouldn't be saying that all the time.
I don't know. No. Well, I don't say it all the time, but I do say it. I think I mean, most of my authors know. I've had authors in the past, sure, who got worked up over it. I've also had this happens very, very, very rarely. But in the past, there have been copy editors who, I don't know if they had a bad day or if they just got tired of correcting who for whom, but, they'll start getting snippy in their comments, and not just say, like, hey, this should be whom, but like, can't you tell the difference or something like, whatever. And so I guess it happens to the best of us. And I think with the authors, it's like sometimes you get tired, I guess, after the repetition of, like, I don't know. I mean, it's not usually that big a problem. Most authors are very cool about it. They understand it. And it's not a big deal, but it helps to just remind them that that's what they're paid for. Pedantic was the word I was looking for, not pedantic. Thank you.
Close enough. I knew what you meant. I think probably everybody else did too. I'm off duty, so I'm not going to ding you for it.
Thank you. Thank goodness.
It's all good. So it must be interesting for you to see how authors adapt to the process of working with an editor. Do you get many who have never worked with an editor before?
Oh, sure.
How does it usually?
No, I take that back. Yes, it used to be the case, but now, maybe it's because it's easier with the internet and everything, but so many people have at least some version of a beta reader, or, a lot of times the agent will, do some editing with them. I'm the first one who does, I don't want to say serious editing. That makes me sound like a jerk, but,
substantial editing?
Substantial editing with them. I've never had anybody who, I mean, nobody has to take everything. The first thing I say is, remember, everything I'm giving you is a suggestion. It's ultimately the very first rule I learned, actually, as an editor, was it's their book. It's not my book. It's their book. And, there might come a time when, whatever they're proposing or something is unpublishable by us for whatever reason. So, you might ultimately say, like, look, either you make this change or we're just not publishing this book. That has never happened in my 37 years doing this, that I've never gotten to that case. So I've always deferred ultimately to them. So what I'm saying is, then the second thing I say to them is, what makes me a better editor of your book than you is that I'm not you. Things that you think are very clear and make perfect sense. I'm not smarter than you. I'm just the same. I'm just as smart as your average reader, right? So I'm just your average reader coming along reading this and saying, I don't know what this means. Like, are they inside the room or are they outside the room? But if they're outside the room, why is this thing, So I'm just like, I just don't understand what's happening. So 99% of the time, it's not an issue. And ultimately, the 1% of the time where, they're like, no, I like the way it sounds. I'm like, okay, it's your book. I don't think this works. And, it makes it, I don't think it doesn't make it a better book to leave it the way it is, but it's your book. So it's not worth, we're not going to cancel the book because of this. So go to town and see what happens. I don't know. I mean, I don't keep track of whether I'm right or wrong. I don't like in those no, seriously, in those instances, I don't like go to Amazon, a year later and look back and see if people wrote reviews that said, I don't understand what was going on in this scene.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, maybe they're right, maybe I'm right. But usually it's like meeting in the middle. It's not about dictating. It's not about saying like, look, you have to make these changes. It's just about saying, I this would make it clearer to me. Maybe that would be work better. But that's what I like. I mean, I always say to the authors, I say, what I love about this is it's like I've got my own private book club with the author. It's just me and the author.
Yeah, no, that's a really cool way to look at it.
Yep.
Yeah. You get to see how the sausage is made, but at the same time, that's actually a pretty cool place to be a lot of the time.
It is a great place to be. I'm fascinated by how it's made. What's really fascinating about authors is almost every one of them has a different technique. They some of them write front to back. That's it. Just straight through. Others of them, I'm going to write the ending, and then I'm going to write this middle scene. I'm going to write this part, blah, blah, blah. I don't know how. I mean, personally, I could never write that way. That would make me insane. Other people, I know an author who writes, honest to God, like an 80-page outline for, a 300-page book. And one time I said to him, like, basically this is the whole book, but without dialogue. You just have to add the dialogue and you got the book. Other people, I had an author, well, I mean, God bless her, she's passed away. But Sue Henry, who was a mystery author of mine, told me, I just know the setup and I have no idea who the murderer is. I just start writing and I see where it takes me. And, I was like, really? You like write a murder mystery and you don't know who the murderer is? She goes, no, I just go and I see what happens. And then when I get to the end, I'm like, okay. And then I might have to go back and add some clues, but, that would also make me crazy. I don't know how you do that.
That is so interesting to me because I am definitely a seat of my pants writer.
Yep.
If I had that 80-page outline, there'd be no reason for me to write the book because I'd already know everything that happened. So, right. But I've always figured that if you were going to write a mystery, you'd have to plot it out first so that all the pieces fit together. But now that you're saying that, my thesis novel is not a mystery. It's a young adult fantasy novel. And, I kept working on it even after I graduated, ended up self-publishing it. But, I sat down with it after I'd let it sit for a couple of months. So it wasn't super fresh in my head and all of that and reading through it. And I'd say, oh, wait, this thing over here how did we get from this to this? I'm not sure I know the answer. Or, this doesn't match this. So which one am I keeping? And if I keep this one, what do I have to go back and change? And I actually really enjoyed that process because it did feel like putting a puzzle together. And now I have to figure out what this is and how to make it work. And maybe that's what mystery writing was like for her. Now that I'm thinking about it. I don't know.
It probably was. She was a very smart, very inventive woman. So I think she probably liked the challenge of like doing it that way. Because I don't think most mystery authors do that. Most of my mystery authors, have outlined the story and they know, from the very beginning, this person committed the murder and, I'm going to go from there. Because that would drive me crazy not doing that. But, different strokes, but it is really interesting. The creative process, they almost all do it very different ways. And I think I hope this won't offend your readers, but listeners, but one author says he does what he calls his vomit draft. He's like, I just vomit it all out, type it all up, and then I go back and start over again. It's like, well, okay, I get that all out of my system, and he just like starts pulling things out. And I was like, well, I mean, I think I wouldn't put it that grossly, but like, I think that would be, if I wrote a book, I think that would be the way I would end up doing it. So,
Well, and there's always Anne Lamott and her famous shitty first drafts essay, which I found one of the most liberating things I'd ever seen in my life when I first read it. I was like, yes, this makes perfect sense. If you expect it to be wonderful, you will fail. Just know it's going to be awful and write it anyway, and then see what you have afterwards. And I just thought that is amazing.
Because isn't that to me, that's the whole point of creativity, is to just like put it all out there. I don't know how you can be. I mean, ultimately, you have to bring things back so that they work. But I don't know how you could be creative within constraints. I think you have to be creative outside of constraints, and then you get the idea and you work it, and then you start chiseling it back down till it's a usable form, right? I mean, I think, but
there are the famous instances of like the guy who wrote the book without the letter E. In which case, I don't think that works. Right. I think one of these days I'm going to look it up and go find it and read it, because I'm just so amazed that anyone was able to do it. But I think it depends on what kind of constraints we're talking about. But yeah, I think that if you go totally without any constraints, you'll end up with something that, as my brother, the architect, once put it to me, doesn't know what it wants to be.
Right.
And then it's just a mess. And, then you have to figure out what it wants to be and hope that there's enough in there that you can run from to turn it into whatever it should be. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I write totally by the seat of my pants. Characters just show up in random places like, oh, hello, hi, who are you? Welcome to the party, and let's see what you have to add, that kind of thing. And yeah, so I've had people who have to plot things tell me that that's not possible and you can't really. And I'm sitting there going, really? I have this book over here. I can show you. I wrote it this way. And I know I'm not the only one who writes this way. And so obviously it can be done. But I think that there's also an argument to be made that if you don't outline in the first place, when you go back to that process of figuring out how it all needs to fit together, you're effectively outlining in reverse.
Yes, exactly. Right, exactly. I mean, ultimately, you do have to do that, right? You just do it in reverse. And that's what Sue would have said. She would have said, it's not a matter, it's just the way she writes, but she has to go back afterwards and be like, okay, now I've got to add these clues in, because otherwise it's just out of left field. Like just some random guy walks in, and I'm the murderer. Who are you? I just showed up and didn't tell anybody for now. Anyway.
You've all been so excited trying to figure out who it was, and it was me, Joe Random, who you've never seen before.
Did you ever read? So my favorite, it's not my favorite, but some of my favorite books are the very, very first Ellery Queen books. I think there's like 5 or 6 of them, where like about 20 pages from the end, they literally stop. And there's just a page where there's just like a line that says, okay, you have all the information you need now. Who's the murderer? The Roman hat mystery, the Greek something mystery, I don't remember. But and then you have to figure, like, okay, who is it? And the answer is always the one person that could not possibly have done it. They're not really like who done it. They're like how done it. Like when you get to the end, it's like it's some crazy way that the murder was committed. And it's always the person who you were convinced could not have done it. And I just found that fascinating. It was like an exercise in torturing your readers, but I did enjoy it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think you're supposed to torture your characters, not torture your readers.
Not your readers. Yeah.
Yeah. Readers don't necessarily tend to react well to being tortured.
Oh, they don't.
So there must have been somebody who either as an author, or their
Mhm.
work has, undergone a dramatic transformation as you've worked with it over time?
Yeah, I would say Mark Graeney, but like I don't take any credit for actually like I mean, I would never say I've transformed somebody's work. That's not
Mm-hmm.
the issue. But Mark Graeney, who writes the Gray Man series, was just a tremendous movie. The Gray Man was a tremendous movie on Netflix, and I've worked with him from his very first book, which was The Gray Man, about 11 years ago. Um, and so what happened was, Mark, the first couple books are great, really fantastic. They're very much straightforward chase scenes. And then I was working with Tom Clancy, and Tom Clancy wanted to get a new co-author. And so I put Mark together with Tom. They hit it off like gangbusters, really liked each other, did 3 books together. And then after Tom died, Mark did 3 or 4 more. I can't remember exactly. Um, but he will say like that, and that really you could see after his first 3 or 4 Gray Man books, they really started to change and become much bigger stories, not just physically bigger, but bigger stories, not just like about the Gray Man chasing someone or being chased by someone, but like machinations and plots and all this stuff. And he said he really got that from writing the Clancy books, that like he had to put all that stuff because that's what Clancy's all about. And he really sort of brought that to his own work. So it really helped him mature, and he would say become a better writer. I take no credit for that. I just take credit for putting him with Clancy, and the rest they did themselves. So
That's great.
mhm.
And you mentioned, the co-author thing, which brings to mind someone like James Patterson, who is
Yeah,
now writing outlines and handing them to other people to write. Do you have an
yep.
opinion about that? Good, bad, indifferent?
I think it's great. I mean, you get books that you like. He is, my understanding is that he is very involved. He comes up with the idea, or like approves the idea, or works with the author on the idea. People really like him. I mean, my thing is, if you read a book and you like it, it's a win all around. It doesn't matter how it got there, what the circumstances were. If you read a book and you were happy at the end, or you were maybe not. You don't just have to be happy. You could also be like thoughtful, or you could be moved, or you could be, But I mean, if you were pleased with the experience, then it's a win all the way around. What always cracks me up is people who, it doesn't happen that often. It used to happen, well, not a lot, but I guess because now it goes to customer service, but it used to come to editorial. People would be like, I read this book and I hated it, and I will never read another Berkley book again, just any random book. And you'd be like, well, okay, but doesn't everybody have experiences that they didn't like? Didn't you eat like a hamburger that you didn't like? And you're like, I'm never eating another hamburger again. That's it. This hamburger was terrible. I mean, that happens, right? Not every book's going to be in everybody's
Right.
taste, but I don't know if those people ever followed through. There's no way to determine whether they did or didn't.
That's an interesting choice to blame the publisher.
Oh, people are always,
Yeah.
well, you figure that anybody who would take the time to write is probably a little bit off kilter, right? I mean, listen, I've read books that I didn't like. You read books you didn't like.
Mhm.
Lots of people did. And, you don't sit down and think like, I am going to write to someone and tell them how terrible this book was. You're just like, yeah, whatever. It wasn't that great.
It reminds me, though, of the people who leave a review on Amazon and say, it took 3 weeks to get here and the cover was
Oh,
creased.
I feel for my authors. I feel for my authors. That is so terrible. You live and die by those ratings, and then somebody gives you a 1 star because the book came late or something. I mean, I don't think those people are being mean. I just don't think they understand. They think
I
they're reviewing
agree.
Amazon, and they don't understand what they're doing to that author. It's terrible. It's really
Yeah.
terrible.
And they don't understand that it's not useful to anybody else.
Right. Exactly.
It's not telling me whether or not I might enjoy this book. It's not telling me anything that I would want to know about the book in
Yep.
order to decide if I want to buy it. It's just like, what? I don't, sorry, but call Amazon and have them send you another one, I mean,
Right.
and they don't. it's interesting that people don't always grasp that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's too bad. It's really awful.
No, it is, because as an author that I interviewed a year or two ago said, "What am I supposed to do about that?"
Nothing. There's nothing you can
Yeah.
do about it. I mean, one of the things we always say to authors is, although actually I've tempered this. I used to say, don't read your Amazon review or any, just don't read them, don't pay attention, blah, blah, blah. But one of my authors, Don Bentley, said to me, no, what you should say is don't read the outlier reviews. But if like all the reviews are telling you, I don't know what, like this character is too mean or something, if there's a bunch of reviews that are saying that, you should take that to heart. If there's just one person who says it, then just ignore it. I was like, oh, that's good. He made a good point. I will now adjust to like be tempered when you read your Amazon reviews. So
That's an interesting approach. I think there's a lot of merit in there. It kind of reminds me what I was thinking when we were talking about, you know, this line is clunky, but if
yeah,
you're really attached to it, because I was always taught, like, if somebody doesn't understand it, then you weren't being clear and you need to go back and change it. And I think that, it's kind of the same thing. It's like there's good advice in there that you need to listen to if enough people are saying the same thing.
yeah, hmm for sure.
Yeah. So have you ever thought about writing a book of your own?
No, nope,
No.
nope, 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 nope. Everybody asks me that, including my wife, who asked me that. She's particularly asked me that in the last 2 years since I started writing this journal. Um, and I just say no because, well, first of all, because seeing how the sausage is made, it is it is a ton of work writing a book. It's
Hmm.
a ton of work. It's astonishing to me that anybody thinks like, oh, you know what? Maybe I'll just write a book. Yeah. Well, good luck with that. Even like a smallish book is 70,000 words, and that's a smallish book, I mean, they're smaller, but it's a ton of work. It's 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 very hard, and I don't think I have anything to say that anybody would want to hear. I mean, okay, before anyone says, now I say this to people and they go like, I love your journal, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, except it's 1 page long. So that I haven't actually counted. It's probably like 200 words or something, a day. And it's on all like today. Well, I actually didn't write one today because I was editing a manuscript, but yesterday was about hiring assistants. Today I would have written about the royal family. Tomorrow I would write about, I don't know, getting water in my sneaker or something. That does not make a book. You can't
Right.
write a book that's like every third page is about something else. So yeah, I don't think I would ever write a book. Now, having said that, who knows? But I don't think so. I think it's too much work. If I was smart enough to write a book, I'd like bet on the ponies or something. Probably put my brain to that purpose. Probably had a better luck.
Well, how did you come to start writing the journal?
So I actually wrote a journal before this called Journal of the Plague, and it started in March of. I can't remember the exact day. I think it was like March 11th. It was the day that we were sent home from work.
Mm-hmm.
So we went home from work, and I'm the one of the editorial. There's two editorial directors, and we report to the editor chief, right? And we each have like about 10 people who report to us, and well, maybe not 10. I probably have like 8 people who report to me. And we were, if you remember back to March of 2020, like it was all this like, COVID and what's happening, and we're gonna go home, and we're gonna work from home, and how long are we gonna work from home? And we were told, like, okay, be prepared to be home for like 2 or 3 weeks. And my boss, my editor in chief, took me aside and said, now her boss was saying could be as long as 6 months. And I remember distinctly saying to her, like, what are you crazy? 6 months? Are you out of your mind? We're not going to be home. How can we be home 6 months? And the next day I got up and it's everything about this is so insane. I just happened to have a steno pad. I have no idea why I had a steno pad in the house. I never took steno. I was never a reporter. I have no idea why I have a steno pad. I had a steno pad, and I thought, I wonder if I wrote, like, I'll write Journal of the Plague day one. And I did. And I can't remember what it was about. It was probably about, I think one of the early ones was about, I don't think this was the first one. One of the early ones was about like how at sea I felt about being at home by myself. My kids were out of the house, and my wife worked in a hospital, so she was still going to work. And I was, doing all these things I don't usually do. And I remember one of the first ones was about how can we have like, I don't know, like 20 knives, 30 forks, 15, teaspoons and 2 tablespoons. Like, where the hell did all the tablespoons go? Like, who's hoarding tablespoons? Why would anyone be hiding a tablespoon around the house? Like, I can't even imagine where they could have gone. So I wrote this whole thing about like these tablespoons, and it was not enlightening. It was just odd. And so that just started. So I was like day one, but I literally thought I'd be writing this for 2 weeks. And it literally went on for 500 days. I wrote it for 500 days. And I stopped right when we went back to work. We went back on September 16th of 2021, right? Wait, this is 2022, 2021. And it literally worked out like Sunday was like day 500. And then I was like, okay, that's it. I'm done. And then I thought, well, I'm going to write something else because I kind of enjoyed writing it. Although that thing I wrote every single day, because they were numbered. So I wrote them every single day. I literally had back surgery. And leading up to the back surgery, I could only lay on my left side. So I wrote like on my left side,
Wow.
In this book. It was insane. And then I said, like, okay, I'm going to continue this, but I'm going to write this Chronicles of the Quotidian. And but I did say to people, the difference is going to be, it'll be most days, but there will be days when I'm just like, I don't really have a good idea, or I'm busy with something else, and I'll just get you tomorrow. So I write it probably like 6 days a week or so. But honestly, I've come to kind of enjoy it. A lot of people, I can't believe how many people follow it. It's just insane to me. And the really freaky thing is that I forget that I write it. So I'll run into people, not just people like I know, but like I went to the VoucherCon, this big mystery convention 2 weeks ago out in Minneapolis, and I went to that. And people are coming up to me and like, I don't know, asking me about like, my cold or something. And I was like, how do you know I had a cold last week? And like, you wrote about it. I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot about that. Really freaky, But yeah, I kind of enjoy it, to be honest with you. I pretend to not like it, but I do kind of like it.
Well, you wouldn't keep writing it if you really didn't like it, right?
Yeah, probably not. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's fun. I enjoyed the one about your mother making you watch Prince Charles become the Prince of Wales.
Even my aunt, who's my mother's sister, was like, you watched that? I was like, Edie, he made me get up in the morning. I had to sit there. I was 7 years old. I'm watching him be invested as the Prince of Wales. It was insane. Mom loved royal stuff. Loved it. So.
Yeah, we certainly got a lot of that in the last couple of weeks.
I know she would have loved this.
Yeah. Yep. I remember my mom getting up to watch him get married in 81. So, that's as close as I get, but yeah.
She made my sisters get up for that one. I didn't have to get up for that one.
That's interesting.
Well, in 81, I was 19 in 81. So I was old enough to be like, all right, I'm just rolling over and going back to sleep. You can, get the girls up to watch this. So they got up and watched it.
Oh my. Well, I was wondering if you might close us out with some advice for people who want to be authors.
Oh. Okay, so good. Yes, the first thing is write all the time. I say that on an intellectual level because any writing teacher will say to you, you want to be an author, you got to write. But I also say that now because while I'm talking about this journal, which is just penny ante little things, but still, any day that I skip, like I skipped today because I absolutely had to get this editorial letter out. I skipped today, it'll be harder to write tomorrow. If I skip tomorrow, it'll be considerably harder to write on Friday. And the only time I had like an extended period was right after Uvalde. Like I went like 4 or 5 days without writing because I just couldn't think. I mean, I don't usually talk about things like that, but I felt like I couldn't not say something about it, but I couldn't think of what to say that wasn't like horrible or whatever. So I just went like, and then the longer I went, the more I was like, I gotta do something, and it was very hard. But you got to write all the time. And then the positive side is that you need to read all the time. You should be reading whatever you like. And then the last thing is write what you want. Don't write to the market. When I go to a writer's thing, there's always someone who'll be, ask you what's selling. And I'll say, look, that is totally the wrong question to ask. It's completely the wrong question. Because first of all I know is what's selling now. If I tell you right now, this is what's selling, and you go home and write it, it's going to take you a year to write it. And you come back then, and I'll say, oh, that's no longer selling now. The market has moved on from that. But beyond that, you can't fake interest or love of things. You can't like pretend. If I said to you like, oh man, horror is really hot, you should really write some horror. If that's not your bag, then that's not your bag. You shouldn't try to be like, I'm going to try to do that. Or, romance is always huge. Romance is always huge. I could never in a million years pretend to write a romance. It would be terrible. And you shouldn't try to do that. You should, I'm not saying like just stick in your lane. I mean, do, expand your horizons, but, be true to yourself. This is what I want to write. And when you write it, when you've written it, you will either be able to sell it to someone who will publish it, you will be able to self-publish it, or you'll just have an interesting story that, your grandchildren will read. We found after my father-in-law died, I didn't even know this, he had taken a creative writing course and he wrote these stories, but they were basically like autobiographical things that had happened to him. And they were great. I mean, they could never have been published because who would ever want to read them? They're just things that, had happened to him. But from our perspective, they were really interesting. It was delightful to have these stories about how grandpa did this and then he did that. And then, so, I think that, reading, writing, and writing what you want are the tricks to being successful. That will drive you to success more than anything else.
That makes perfect sense to me, especially the part about writing what you want to write and not writing something for the purpose of selling it.
No. Almost no one can do this. Certainly, I say that with hesitation because I'm sure someone will come back and say, here's this famous author who blah, blah. Well, like the guys, remember early on I said Elmore Leonard and those guys were pulp writers and they wrote Westerns or they wrote mysteries or whatever was selling. Okay, well, congratulations, but you're not Elmore Leonard. Yeah, good for him, but there's a reason he's Elmore Leonard and I'm Tom Colgan because he's a genius and I'm not. So I wouldn't try to do that.
Well, he would have had to have been interested in it on some level. Anyway.
Probably, yeah. I would think you're probably right. I don't think that I don't think he ever wrote a romance, right?
Right.
Yeah. So there you go. That proves it. Who would love to read an Elmore Leonard romance, though? That would be awesome.
That would be interesting.
Rom-com would be fantastic.
It would probably have so many other oddball elements of the other kinds of things that he wrote. It would be really interesting.
That would be great, yeah.
Well, that seems like a perfect place to stop. But thank you so much. This has been such a fascinating conversation.
Well, thanks a lot, Nancy. I really had a great time.
That's our show. I'm so grateful to Tom Colgan for sharing his career and insights with us. And as always, to you for listening. If you enjoy Follow Your Curiosity, please leave a review. There's a link right in your podcast app. And tell us what you'd write about if you decided to write a book or what you've already written about. And don't forget to share this episode with a friend. Thanks so much. If this episode resonated with you, don't forget to get in touch on any of my social platforms or even via email at nancy@fycuriosity.com and tell me what you loved. And if you're feeling a little bit less than confident in your creative process right now, and you haven't yet signed up for my free email series on 6 of the most common creative beliefs that are messing you up, please check it out. It'll untangle those myths and help you get rolling again. You can find it at fycuriosity.com, and there's also a link right in your podcast app. See you there, and see you next week. Follow Your Curiosity is produced by me, Nancy Norbeck, with music by Joseph McDade. If you like Follow Your Curiosity, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to tell your friends. It really helps me reach new listeners. Thanks.